So, gonna show you all today how to do the rear shocks on this 2006 Volvo S60 2.5 Turbo. It's got the all-wheel drive. So I didn't see a whole lot of information out there on YouTube or the forums on how to do this, and they're a little different, a little more complicated way of getting them out than the front-wheel drive ones. So, we'll walk you through this thing. And yeah, so you're gonna need a couple of tools. This is what I used. So you need some penetrant. I live up in New England, so we get rust all over the place. You need a hammer, got a couple of pin punches, got a 13 mil, 15 mil, in a couple different drive sizes. Got some wrenches, a light, big pry bar, a jack stand, and that's an 18 mil with a torque wrench. So, and if you have an impact, that's always good to have, but you don't have to. So let's walk around the other side of the car here. Alright, so first thing you're going to do, jack her up, get her on the jack stand. Alright, so now that we've got it up on the jack stand there, you can pull the wheel off. Alright, so there's our shock. It's actually a strut, not a shock, if you want to be technically correct. So there's a couple things we got to take off in here. So first, what you're going to want to do is remove your brake bracket. It's two 13 mil bolts. Pull those out of there and pull your brake caliper off. Alright, so now that you got your brake caliper out the way, you're going to want to go ahead and take out this piece of the control arm, or the drag link. So it's a 15 millimeter. You're going to want to loosen this one, and then you want to take the bottom one completely out that's on the knuckle. So go ahead and do that. Alright, get that loosened up, and then we'll take the bottom one out. Alright, so once you get those out, you want to take your bottom strut bolt out. That's also a 15 mil. Alright, so now that you got that lower strut bolt out, you're going to want to make sure you support your caliper. Don't let it dangle by the hose. So I like to use a jack stand, but you can use a bungee cord, block of wood, anything. So anyways, what you're going to do is get your big pry bar. Sorry about that, just knock stuff over. You're going to have to take your big pry bar and you're going to pop it out off of its pin. Now it's going to spring a little bit because it's got some tension in those bushings, but you'll be alright. Just make sure everything's out of the way. So, it's like that. There we go. Now we're good. Alright, so now we'll move on up to the top. So, grab my light. So we get up in here. So you're going to pull, you'll have your inner fender well covering, so you take that out. And you have this disc on top, so you take that out. So the only thing you got to do in here is just take this one 10 mil out. Alright, so there we go. That's all you got to do inside the trunk. Now, last thing you got to do, hold on, let me grab my light here. Alright, so the last thing you got to do, if you look up under here, you got one bolt there. And it might be kind of hard to see here, but you got another one. My light for you. Got another one right there. So, you got to take those out, and then that'll completely have the strut freed up. Alright, so we got those two bolts out, so now this whole thing's good to go. Now this is why I had you take out that bottom bolt, so you can drop this drag arm down and move it out of the way. What you got to do, you got to guide it around. It's kind of hard to do this with one hand, but guide it around this way. So it's on the front of your drag link, like that. Then what you gotta do, gotta rotate it. You might have to push down on this, on the whole thing like that. You can just get a big pry bar or just lean on it. Don't bend your backing plate doing that. But you push down on it and you maneuver it out. So I'm gonna do that. All right, there we go. There she is. Because of the way the bushings were set up, I ended up having to take my big pry bar, stick it in here, and then force the whole thing down while I'm, wiggling it with the other hand to get it. So this is a, what I think, 3.5 foot pry bar, something like that. It's a big one. Also, it's a snap-on. I love snap-on tools. I think they're the best tools out there. They are a little pricey, but you get what you pay for, in my opinion. So, except for hammers, you can use a hammer for whatever. So we'll go to the bench and get this thing rebuilt. All right, so here we are at the bench. We got our strut with all that. And these are a couple of tools you need. So you're going to need a spring compressor set in order to rebuild it. If you got quick struts, you can skip this part because it should just come with all this already on it, and you just slide it back up in there. But if you're going to rebuild the shock, because honestly it's a lot cheaper if you're doing it yourself, in my opinion, just buying a shock versus buying a whole assembly. So you're going to need a 10 mil. I didn't have the metric 18 mil to go on the sender, but the 3/4 offset wrench, it's pretty close. It'll work. And then you're also going to need a T40 socket, and I use a breaker bar to hold the center stud. And this is just returning the spring compressor. So we're going to go ahead and get the spring compressor on there. Alright, so we got our spring compressor on there. That is 180 degrees apart as I can get them. So let's go ahead and tighten them on down. Alright, so we got our spring compressed down. It's nice and free. So what we're going to do next, take out the top part of this mount. We're going to take out these 3 10 mils. And then I have a little gun here to zip them out too. So, alright, so there's that top mounting bolt. So what you're going to do is you take your offset wrench, get her down in there, then you take your T40, get it in the middle, and now you can hold your stud in place while you turn the nut off. Something I forgot to mention, I like to hit the center with an impact first. It may or may not come off, but it at least helps get it loose so you're not putting too much torque against that little T40, because I've seen those strip out, break off, bend, all that good stuff. Alright, so the nut's off, and something I want to mention before we take this apart, you want to make sure you get your orientation of your mount correct, because you're going to have a heck of a time getting it lined back up with the spring and getting it lined back up with the shock, because the spring only fits on there one way, and this only fits in to the vehicle one way. So you kind of got to get it lined up. So if you need to take a paint marker and mark it, everything, so you get a reference line, go ahead and do that. But we're going to slide this other part of the mount off. And we've got the actual mount itself. Now we can take our spring assembly, slide it off. We'll set it down right there. There you go. Alright, so that is how you get it apart. Now we'll put her back together. Alright, so here we got our new shock. Comes with the nuts. You don't want to take that off. And it's pretty much the same as before. You're going to slide your spring assembly on. And just a note, I like to wrap a towel over a couple times before I put it in the vise. Just helps from marking up the new piece. And we're going to get our mount on there. Again, we're going to line up in the correct orientation. Sorry. So we're in the correct orientation. You can see where the original, see where it sat before. So you just get her on there. Then you put your centerpiece in, which we'll do that. Get your centerpiece on there. And something to note on this centerpiece, so you got this divot right here. you've also, this is why I said you got to make sure you line it up right. You've also got a little, get her to focus. There, maybe you can see it. There it is. It's got that little divot there. That has got to line up on the mount, and then you got to line that up with the rest of it. So I'm going to put the camera down for a sec. Alright, so the divot is lined up. These holes are lined up. And that's lined up on the mount. So we'll go ahead and put the bolts back in, tighten her in there. Alright, so we've got our mount back together, spring compressors removed. That center nut's nice and tight. So let's go and stick her back in the vehicle. Okay, so a quick little update. There's the shock back in. With this, I found that to get the right angle to get that in there, I actually ended up having to take that all the way out. And then, so I took the big pry bar, pressed down on it, and just kind of wiggled and made it go in. So it's a little tricky, but if you work at it, you can get it. So once you get that up in there, you're going to put those two 13mm bolts back in, but don't tighten them all the way down, just get them in there. Alright, so just got that in there. Oops. Let's put that one in. So this went a little differently than the last one. So I ended up having to not be able to get this one in, and then took my big pry bar, got it in here, and just about had to stand on it to get it to go down far enough to get the shock on. So it may require a little bit of fighting. If you really felt like going for an adventure, you could loosen up all of your bushing bolts. So there's one up in there, there's one over right there, and there's also one down here. So if you loosen those up, it'll give you a little more play, maybe make it a little bit easier for you. Oh, there's one right there too. So you can do that, or you can do it the way I did. Just take a big pry bar, force it down into place. Make sure you're not prying on anything that's going to get damaged. So get this bolt in here. We get those tightened down. We'll get our lower shock mount bolt put back in there. And we'll come back to the trunk. We'll get our 10mm put back in there. Then tighten all that down. Put your brake bracket back on. Get your control arm back in there. And there you go. That's how you do the shocks. Alright, have a good one. Thanks.